in the quiet English village of Millbrook, where everyone knew everyone else's name and nothing exciting ever seemed to happen. Minus 1-year-old Emma walked slowly down the cobblestone street with her school bag dragging behind her. She was the kind of girl who always sat in the back row of the classroom, never raised her hand even when she knew the answer, and spent most lunch breaks reading alone under the old oak tree in the schoolyard. Emma had always felt like she was living in the shadows while everyone else lived in the bright sunlight. At school, the other children barely noticed her. Teachers often forgot to call on her during lessons, even at home. Her busy parents sometimes seemed to look right through her as they rushed round preparing dinner, or checking their phones, but Emma was not completely alone in the world. She had one true friend who saw her when others did not. Jack was everything Emma was not. He was bold where she was careful, loud where she was quiet, and brave where she was afraid. Jack had wild brown hair that never stayed combed, bright green eyes that sparkled with mischief, and a smile that could convince anyone to join his latest adventure. On this particular cloudy afternoon in October, as the autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet and the air smelled of wood smoke from nearby chimneys, Emma and Jack were walking their usual route home from school. They passed Mrs. Baker's flower shop with its colorful window display, then Mr. Thompson's bicycle repair shop where the old man always waved at them through the window. As they turned the corner onto Maple Street, something caught Jack's attention that he had never really noticed before. At the very end of the street, past all the neat little houses with their well-kept gardens and freshly painted fences, stood a house that looked completely different from all the others. The Victorian house was tall and narrow, with dark wooden boards that had once been painted white but were now grey with age and weather. Thick green ivy climbed up the walls like fingers reaching toward the roof. The windows were dark and empty, some with broken glass that caught the weak afternoon sunlight. The front garden was wild and overgrown, with tall weeds and bushes that had not been trimmed for many years. Jack stopped walking and stared at the house with growing excitement. Emma noticed that her friend had become very quiet, which was unusual for him. She followed his gaze and felt a little shiver run down her spine when she saw what had captured his attention. "Emma," Jack said in a low voice, his eyes fixed on the mysterious house, "I dare you to go inside that place with me." Emma's heart immediately began to beat faster. She had heard stories about the old house from some of the older children at school. They said it had been empty for more than 10 years, ever since the last family who lived there had moved away suddenly one night. Some people in the village whispered that strange things happened there, that lights sometimes appeared in the windows even though no one lived inside anymore. Emma was always the one who followed rules. She was the girl who never stayed out past dinner time, who always did her homework before watching television, and who had never gotten in trouble with her parents or teachers. The idea of going into an abandoned house made her stomach feel tight with worry. But when she looked at Jack's face, she saw something that made her pause. His encouraging smile was not the mischievous grin he usually wore when he wanted to get into trouble. Instead, it was the warm, supportive look he gave her when he believed she could do something brave and important, only if. "We stick together," Emma heard herself saying, and she was surprised by the strength in her own voice. Jack's smile grew even brighter. "Of course we'll stick together. We always do." They walked slowly toward the house, their footsteps echoing differently on this quiet end of the street. The iron gate at the front of the property was rusty and made a loud creaking sound when Jack pushed it open. Emma noticed that her hands were shaking slightly as they walked up the cracked stone path that led to the front door. The house seemed to watch them as they approached. Emma could not shake the feeling that the dark windows, were like eyes, observing their every move. She had to take several deep breaths to calm herself as Jack reached for the old brass doorknob that was green with age. To their surprise, the door was not locked. It opened with a long, groaning sound that seemed to echo through the empty rooms. Inside, sunlight streamed through the dirty windows, creating patterns of light and shadow on the dusty wooden floors. The air inside smelled old and forgotten. Like books that had been closed for too many years. Old furniture sat throughout the rooms, covered with white sheets that made them look like sleeping ghosts waiting to wake up. On the walls, family photographs still hung in their frames, showing the smiling faces of people who had once filled this house with laughter and conversation. Emma felt her fear beginning to change into something else entirely. As she looked round at the forgotten treasures and imagined the families who had once called this place home, she whispered softly, "This place tells so many stories." As Emma and Jack stepped further into the mysterious house, their eyes began to adjust to the dim light that filtered through the dirty windows. The ground floor held secrets that made them both gasp with wonder. In the kitchen, they discovered old china plates and teacups still sitting neatly in the wooden cupboards, as if the family who lived here had just stepped out for a walk and would return any moment to prepare their evening meal. Emma ran her fingers along the dusty kitchen counter and imagined a mother standing here years ago, perhaps making breakfast for her children before they hurried off to school. The old stove still had pots sitting on top of it, and dry herbs hung from hooks on the ceiling, filling the air with the faint smell of lavender and rosemary. In the sitting room, books were scattered across a large wooden table, their pages yellowed with age. Some were still open, as if someone had been reading them and had simply walked away in the middle of a chapter. Jack picked up one of the books and blew the dust from its cover. It was a collection of fairy tales with beautiful illustrations of castles and dragons. "Look at this, Emma," Jack said, showing her a page with a drawing of a brave princess rescuing a village from a terrible monster. This must have belonged to a child who loved adventure stories. Emma smiled as she looked at the colorful pictures. She had always loved books, but she usually preferred quiet stories about friendship and kindness. Still, there was something magical about holding a book that another child had treasured so many years ago. Everything in the house seemed frozen in time, as if it were waiting patiently for someone to bring life back to these walls. The silence was not frightening anymore. Instead, it felt peaceful, like the house was taking a long, quiet nap and dreaming of the days when it had been filled with voices and laughter. "Let's check upstairs," Jack suggested, his voice full of excitement. He was already heading toward the wooden staircase that curved up to the second floor. Emma followed her friend, but she was much more careful than he was. She had always been the cautious one, and something about the old house made her want to move slowly and pay attention to every detail. She tested each step with her foot before putting her full weight on it, listening for any sounds that might warn her of danger. The stairs groaned and creaked under their feet, making sounds like an old person getting up from a comfortable chair. But the wood felt solid and strong, and Emma began to feel more confident as they climbed higher. Upstairs, they discovered 3 bedrooms and a small study that must have been used as an office or library. Each room told a different story about the family who had once lived here. The first bedroom had been decorated for adults, with a large bed covered by a faded blue quilt and a dressing table with an old mirror that reflected their faces in a strange, wavy way. The second bedroom was smaller and simpler, perhaps used by an older child or a guest who came to visit. But it was the third bedroom that made both Emma and Jack stop and stare in amazement. This room had clearly belonged to young children. Toys were scattered across the wooden floor as if the children had been playing just moments. Before there was a beautiful wooden rocking horse with a red saddle and a flowing mane that had once been white but was now grey with dust. Colorful building blocks were stacked in careful towers that had somehow managed to stay standing all these years. Picture books with faded covers lay open on a small table, their pages showing drawings of animals and fairy tale characters. Emma felt her heart fill with a warm, sad feeling as she looked round the room. She could almost hear the voices of children laughing and playing, sharing stories and building imaginary worlds with their toys. Someone was really happy here once, Emma said softly, bending down to pick up a small teddy bear that sat near the window. The bear had been loved well. Its brown fur was worn smooth from countless hugs, and one of its button eyes was hanging loose by a single thread. But its face still had a kind, gentle expression that made Emma want to hold it close. Jack had moved toward the tall window that looked out over the overgrown back garden. He wanted to get a better look at the wild fruit trees and the old swing that hung from a large oak branch. Emma, come see this view, Jack called, stepping closer to the window. You can see the whole village from up here. But as Jack moved forward, eager to show his friend what he had discovered, something terrible happened. The old floorboard beneath his feet, weakened by years of rain and weather that had leaked through the roof, suddenly gave way with a loud, sharp crack that echoed through the quiet house. Emma watched in complete horror as her best friend disappeared through the floor, crashing down into the room below with a terrible thud that seemed to shake the entire house. Jack! Emma screamed, dropping the teddy bear and rushing to the jagged hole that had opened in the floor. Far below, Jack lay very still among broken wooden beams and chunks of white plaster that had fallen with him. His leg was trapped under a heavy piece of timber, and his face was pale and frightened. Emma could see that he was barely conscious, his eyes struggling to stay open. Emma, Jack whispered in a voice so weak she could barely hear him. I can't move my leg. It really hurts. Emma's heart pounded with fear unlike anything she had ever felt before. But even through her terror, she knew that she had to be strong for her friend. Emma knelt by the jagged hole in the floor, her knees pressing against the rough wooden edges as she looked down at her best friend. Her whole body was shaking so hard that she had to grip the broken floorboards to keep herself steady. Jack lay, motionless in the room below, surrounded by pieces of broken wood and white chunks of plaster that had fallen with him when the old floor gave way. Jack's face was very pale, almost as white as the plaster dust that covered his dark hair. Emma could see that he was trying hard to be brave, but his eyes showed the terrible pain he was feeling. The heavy wooden beam that had trapped his leg looked impossibly big and heavy, and Emma knew there was no way she could move it by herself. Don't. Wait, Jack, Emma called down to him, trying to make her voice sound strong and confident, even though inside she felt more frightened than she had ever been in her entire life. I'm going to get help for you. Emma's hands were trembling as she pulled her mobile phone from her jacket pocket. She had gotten the phone for her 12th birthday just 2 months ago, and her parents had told her it was only for emergencies. If this was not an emergency, Emma thought, then nothing ever would be. But when she looked at the small screen on her phone, her heart sank. There were no bars showing a signal. The phone showed only empty spaces where the signal strength should be displayed. Emma held the phone up high above her head, then moved to different parts of the room, hoping to find even the weakest connection to the outside world. But it was no use. The thick stone walls of the old Victorian house seemed to block everything from the outside world, creating a barrier that her phone could not break through. I have to leave you for a little while, Emma said, and she could hear her own voice breaking with emotion. The thought of leaving Jack alone in this dark, empty house made her feel sick to her stomach. But I promise I'll come back with help. I promise. Jack. Jack looked up at her through the hole in the floor, and even though he was hurt and scared, he managed to give her a small, encouraging smile. I know you will, Emma, he said in a voice that was weak but still filled with trust. You're braver than you think you are. Those words hit Emma like a bolt of lightning. All her life, she had thought of herself as the scared one, the quiet one, the girl who always needed someone else to take care of her. She had always believed that Jack was the brave one and she was just the follower. But now, when it mattered, more than anything else in the world, Jack was telling her that she had courage inside her that she had never known was there. Emma had always been the quiet girl who let others take the lead in every situation. In school, she never volunteered to answer questions even when she knew the right answers. During games at recess, she always waited for someone else to choose the teams and tell her where to stand. At home, she let her parents make all the decisions about what to eat for dinner, what television programs to watch, and how to spend their weekends. But now, in this moment of crisis, her best friend's life depended entirely on her. There was no one else to take charge, no adult to step in and solve the problem, no teacher or parent to tell her what to do for the first time in her life. Emma was completely responsible for making the right choices and taking the right actions. Emma stood up on shaking legs and took one last look down at Jack. I'll be back as fast as I can, she promised, and then she turned and ran through the dusty house as if her life depended on it. She ran past the children's bedroom with its scattered toys, down the creaking staircase that now seemed much more dangerous than it had before, through the sitting room with its open books, and past the kitchen with its old china still sitting quietly in the cupboards. Emma burst through the front door of the house and into the grey afternoon light. She ran down the cracked stone path, through the rusty iron gate, and onto Maple Street. Then she began to run faster than she had ever run in her entire life. Her school bag bounced against her back with every step, but she did not stop to take it off. Her lungs began to burn as she gulped the cold autumn air, and her legs started to ache from the effort of running so hard. But Emma did not slow down, not even for a second. Every moment that passed was another moment that Jack was lying hurt. And alone in that dark house, Emma sprinted past all the familiar houses on Maple Street, past Mrs. Baker's flower shop and Mr. Thompson's bicycle repair shop. People she passed on the street turned to stare at her as she ran by, probably wondering why a quiet girl like Emma was running through the village like she was being chased by a wild animal. But Emma paid no attention to the curious looks from neighbors and shopkeepers. She had only one thought in her mind, and that was getting help for Jack as quickly as possible. Emma ran straight to the village fire station, which was located in a red brick building right in the center of town. Outside the station, Mr. William, the fire chief, was washing one of the big red fire engines with a long hose, humming quietly to himself as he worked. "Please help," Emma gasped, barely able to catch her breath or form the words properly. "My friend Jack is trapped in the old house on Maple Street. He fell through the floor and can't move." The moment Emma finished explaining what had happened, Mr. William dropped his hose and sprang into action like a man half his age. He had been the fire chief in Millbrook for more than 20 years, and he had seen many emergencies, but the urgency in Emma's voice told him that every second counted. William pressed a large red button on the wall of the fire station, and immediately loud sirens began to wail throughout the building. Within moments, firefighters came running from different directions, pulling on their heavy protective coats and helmets as they moved. Emma watched in amazement as these brave men and women transformed from ordinary people into a rescue team. "In less than 2 minutes, show us exactly where your friend is. Mr. Williams said to Emma as he helped her climb into the front seat of the big red fire engine. Behind them, paramedics were loading their ambulance with special medical equipment and stretchers. As the fire engine raced through the narrow streets of Millbrook with its sirens blaring and lights full, Ashing, Emma felt her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. She had done everything she could think of to help Jack, but now she had to trust that these experienced adults would be able to save her best friend. When they arrived at the old Victorian house, the rescue team worked with incredible speed and precision. Firefighter Thomas, a tall man with gentle eyes and strong hands, immediately assessed the situation. He looked down through the hole in the floor and spoke calmly to Jack, asking him questions about how he was feeling and whether he could move different parts of his body. "We're going to get you out of there safely, son," Thomas called down to Jack. "Just stay as still as you can and try not to worry." While Thomas prepared to climb down through the hole in the floor, other firefighters brought in special equipment that Emma had never seen before. They had powerful jacks that could lift heavy objects, thick ropes and pulleys for moving large pieces of debris, and bright lights that could illuminate the darkest corners of the damaged room. Emma wanted to stay close to the hole in the floor so she could see what was happening to Jack. But Mrs. Helen, a kind paramedic with grey hair and warm brown eyes, gently guided her outside to the front garden of the house. "It's better if we let the rescue team do their work without getting in their way," Mrs. Helen explained, putting a comforting arm round Emma's shoulders. "They know exactly what they're doing, and they'll take very good care of your friend." Emma found herself holding Mrs. Helen's hand without even realizing it. The paramedic's hands were warm and steady, and somehow that simple touch made Emma feel less alone and frightened. "You did exactly the right thing," Mrs. Helen said warmly, looking directly into Emma's eyes. "Your quick thinking and brave actions probably saved your friend's life. If you had waited even a few more minutes before getting help, Jack might have been hurt much worse." Emma stared at Mrs. Helen in surprise. All her life, Emma had thought of herself as the scared one, the quiet one, the girl who was afraid to speak up in class when she knew the answer to a question. She was the one who never volunteered to read aloud during story time, who always chose the safest activities during gym class, and who preferred to follow rather than lead in any situation. But today, when it really mattered more than anything else in the world, she had found courage deep inside herself that she never knew existed. She had run faster than she thought possible, spoken up loudly and clearly to adults she barely knew, and made quick decisions that could mean the difference between life and death for her best friend. Inside the house, Emma could hear the rescue team working steadily. There were sounds of equipment being moved, voices calling out instructions, and the occasional creak of old wooden beams being carefully shifted. After what felt like hours, but was probably only about 30 minutes, Emma heard Thomas call out, "We've got him free. Bring the stretcher up here." A few minutes later, the front door of the old house opened, and the rescue team carefully carried Jack outside on a special stretcher. His left leg was secured in a temporary brace, and his face was still pale, but his eyes were open and alert. When he saw Emma standing in the garden, he managed to give her a weak but genuine smile. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Jack whispered, as the paramedics loaded his stretcher into the back of the ambulance. His voice was quiet, but Emma could hear the deep gratitude and friendship in every word. Emma walked beside the stretcher and gently squeezed Jack's hand. "Best friends never give up on each other," she replied, and she meant every word, as all of this was happening. Something wonderful and unexpected had occurred. The entire village of Millbrook had gathered round the old Victorian house to watch the rescue. Emma looked round and saw faces she recognized from the shops and streets of her small town. but she also saw many people she had never really noticed before. Mrs. Dorothy, who owned the corner shop where Emma sometimes bought sweets after school, came up to her with tears in her eyes. "You are a true hero, dear," Mrs. Dorothy said, giving Emma a warm hug. "What you did today took real courage." Other villagers approached Emma throughout the afternoon, shaking her hand, patting her on the back, and telling her how proud they were of her bravery. For the first time in her 12 years of life, Emma did not feel invisible or forgotten. She felt strong, capable, and truly valued by her community. 3 months had passed since the terrifying autumn afternoon when Emma and Jack had first entered the old Victorian house on Maple Street. The cold winter days had slowly given way to the warm sunshine of spring. And with the changing seasons had come changes that neither Emma nor Jack could have ever imagined when they first pushed open that creaky iron gate on this bright Saturday morning in May. Emma and Jack stood side by side in front of what had once been the most frightening place in their village, but the building they looked at now was so different from the dark, abandoned house they remembered that it was almost impossible to believe it was the same place. The village council had held many meetings during the winter months, and after much discussion and planning, they had made a wonderful decision. Instead of tearing down the old house or letting it continue to fall apart, they would renovate it completely and transform it into something that would benefit the entire community. The broken wooden boards that had once covered the windows were gone, replaced by large, clean windows that sparkled in the morning sunlight. The overgrown ivy had been carefully trimmed away from the walls, revealing beautiful stonework that had been hidden for years. The roof had been repaired with new tiles, and the walls had been painted a cheerful cream color that made the whole building look warm and welcoming. Inside, skilled workers had spent weeks replacing the dangerous old floorboards with beautiful new hardwood that gleamed like honey in the light. The dusty, forgotten rooms had been transformed with fresh coats of paint in soft colors like pale yellow, light blue, and gentle green. New furniture had been brought in, including comfortable reading chairs, sturdy tables for doing homework or playing games, and shelves lined with hundreds of brand new books. The house had been turned into a community center where children from all over Millbrook could come to read, play, learn, and spend time with their friends in a safe and happy environment. There was a large room filled with books for children of all ages. From picture books with colorful illustrations to adventure stories for older readers, another room had been set up with art supplies where children could paint, draw, and create beautiful projects. There was even a small kitchen where cooking classes would be held, teaching young people how to prepare healthy meals. But perhaps the most amazing transformation had happened in the back garden. The wild, overgrown yard had been completely replanted, with colorful flowers that bloomed in every shade imaginable. There were bright red roses, sunny yellow daffodils, purple lavender, and white daisies that danced in the gentle spring breeze. A small playground had been built with swings, slides, and climbing equipment, all surrounded by soft grass where children could run and play safely. "I can't believe this is the same scary house we explored all those months ago," Jack said, leaning slightly on the wooden walking stick that he still needed for support. His leg had healed very well, and the doctors said he would make a complete recovery. But he still needed the walking stick when he planned to be on his feet for long periods of time. Jack looked at the cheerful building and the beautiful garden, and he shook his head in amazement. The place that had once seemed so dark and frightening was now filled with sunshine and the sound of children's laughter. Through the open windows, they could see younger children from the village playing games, reading books, and working on art projects with big smiles on their faces. Emma smiled as she watched a group of 6-year-old children running safely through The rooms where she had once felt so afraid and uncertain. The house that had seemed so lonely and forgotten was now alive with joy and friendship. Children who might have spent their afternoons alone at home now had a place where they could come to learn new things, make new friends, and discover talents. They never knew they had daughters. Emma and Jack stood together looking at the transformed building. They heard someone calling Emma's name. They turned to see Mayor Johnson walking toward them with a big smile on his face and a large pair of golden scissors in his hands. "Emma," the mayor said warmly, "we would be honored if you would cut the ribbon at our grand opening ceremony today. After all, if it weren't for your brave actions that day, we might never have realized what a special place this could become." Emma felt her cheeks turn pink with pride and slight embarrassment as she took the heavy scissors. From the mayor, all round her, she could see her family, her friends, her teachers, and neighbors from all over Millbrook gathering for the ceremony. There were people she had known all her life and others she was just beginning to meet, but all of them had come to celebrate this special day. As Emma held the large scissors and looked at the bright red ribbon stretched across the front door of the community center, she thought about how much she had changed since that cloudy afternoon in October. She was no longer the shy, invisible girl who was afraid to speak up or take risks. The frightening experience in the old house had taught her that she was much stronger and braver than she had ever imagined possible. More importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most frightening situations in life can lead to the most beautiful and unexpected transformations. What had started as a scary adventure had become something wonderful that would benefit children in a village for many years to come. Emma took a deep breath and spoke clearly into the microphone that someone had set up for the ceremony. This community center will be a place where every child can discover their own courage and know they're never alone, she said, her voice strong and confident. The end.